Thanks for watching Queen City News Plus. This is Order in the Court. I'm Chief Analyst Khalif Rhodes, and today we have Chief Transportation Correspondent MayCay Beeler here. Today, MayCay, we're talking about something that happened with a number of things regarding the Greg Biffle estate. The Dutton estate filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the estate of NASCAR driver Greg Biffle months after the plane crash, killing him and a number of other folks on the plane. Prior to this, Emma Biffle filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Dutton estate. So there's cross complaints going here. And previously, we had a preliminary NTSB report. So I wanted to talk with you about a couple of things. First, the report mentioned a combination of possible faulty flight instruments and pilot behavior that may have contributed to the deadly crash. Can you explain some of the things that the report mentioned and how that could have affected the flight?
So more than likely, we do have the early report by the NTSB, which tells us what happened, but not why it happened.
Got it.
Okay.
Got
So
it.
there were reports that there were some mechanical issues and more than likely pilot error and some judgment problems
Got it.
regarding the fact who was flying the plane and who was qualified to fly the plane.
Got it.
So typically accidents are a chain of events. So do want everybody to know, I am an airline transport pilot. I'm a flight instructor, FAA safety counselor. I don't know everything, of course not, and I'm not an attorney, but I can give you my professional opinion
Mm-hmm.
of what we know so far.
So the reason I ask you that question is because in our state we have something called contributory negligence, meaning if you contribute to your own accident for any scenario, even 1% in our state, then you're barred from bringing that claim.
Mm,
So when I talked about cross complaints,
right.
having the Dutton family suing the Biffles and then the Biffles suing the Duttons, my question is this altimeter they mentioned in the report. What does that do?
So the altimeter is a flight instrument that's very, very important. It tells us how high the plane is above sea level.
Okay.
We also have radar altimeters that tell us how high we are above the ground. But if you were at the beach, it would read 0, your altimeter would. And here in the Piedmont Triad at Charlotte, or they're up at Statesville, typically about 800 feet above the ground. So it would start at 800 feet, and then if I climbed to 1,000 feet above that, the altimeter would read 1,800 feet. The important thing is it tells you how high you are. So
Yeah.
it's a very important instrument.
So let me ask you this. Is that something you're checking before the flight, like a
Yes,
pre-check?
absolutely.
Okay.
Everything is checked.
So
Right.
do you think the fact would a co-pilot check that or would the actual pilot
Well,
check
the
that?
co-pilot was not qualified.
Got it. Got it.
So I'm sorry, God bless you, but you're of no help to me. The pilot and commander is responsible for everything.
And they do the entire flight check?
They
Pre-flight check?
should. They're
Okay.
responsible. They are
Okay.
legally responsible. They are the final authority regarding that flight.
So in a scenario like that, when they're talking about that at some point they recognized in this preliminary report that there was faulty altitude indicator, malfunctioning flight instruments, and then things that the engine temperature indicator was not reporting and not working properly. If you're noticing those things in flight, what would you do as a pilot if you're seeing these things? You didn't recognize it before you took off, but now you're in the flight and it's happening.
I think according to the preliminary report, they had some clues before they took off,
Got it.
but they took off anyway. All right. But let's say they didn't see they had a problem
Yeah.
and they took off. You climb to a safe altitude, you assess the situation. Okay, can we fix this? Let's get out the checklist. What can we do? You're at a safe altitude, and then you determine, let's go back to the airport if we
Okay.
need to, or we can continue on.
But I got to follow up then. If this altimeter is not properly working, how do you get to a safe altitude?
Right. Well, they had dual flight controls.
Okay.
That means the pilot has flight controls, the co-pilot has flight controls. So I'm the pilot, I can just look over there to the right side. Now, if both of them aren't working, that is an issue. But
Are there other ways you can figure out how?
well, you can look out the window.
Got it.
But there were some marginal conditions, meaning maybe they were in and out of the clouds. So that case, they would have to get under the clouds. Hopefully, they're not going to hit any hills or trees,
Wow.
and kind of determine, well, we're about 500 feet above. And they came back and landed. It seems that everything happened quite quickly.
Got it. So have you ever been in a situation where your instruments were not properly working and you had to do some type of landing or emergency landing or make an assessment in midair?
I have, we have, batteries and alternators. So the electrical system's gone out on me several times.
Oh, wow.
That is considered an emergency.
Yeah, so those types of things, when looking at this from a legal perspective, would be helpful to know. And obviously, with a case like this, they're going to have experts, folks like yourself, that have been pilots, that have been in flight instructors, that would know how to work in those scenarios. Because when you're looking at a claim like this, again, you're trying to see, well, first of all, duty. Do I have a duty to maintain this plane? Have I breached that duty? Was my failure to maintain it the proximate cause of the damages? And then do I have damages? Well, ultimately, these are the worst type of damages. You have a wrongful death claim. But on the other side, it's, do I have a duty to properly fly the plane? Did I breach that duty? Was that the cause? And that's what's going to really be is it pilot error or is it owner operator?
Owner-operator error.
Yeah.
So both, from what we know, and the information we have now is preliminary, it can change. But from what we know, Greg Biffle was the operator of the aircraft. So he had to know that he has to hire somebody to fly that plane who's qualified.
Right.
Greg Biffle was not qualified. Yes, he's a private pilot and he has experience, but not qualified to fly in that particular airplane. His son was a private pilot. They could have been the best pilots in the world, but they weren't qualified to fly that plane.
Got it.
So Jack's father, Dennis Dutton, knows that on his pilot certificate, he has to have a type rating to fly that plane, and he does. Type rating is just advanced training.
Yeah.
For
Specific types of endorsement.
Right. It's extra training you have to fly a jet or an airplane over 12,500 feet, or 12,500 pounds, excuse me. Again, Jack could have been the best pilot in the world, same with Greg, but they're not qualified. The father would know that, yeah, he needed a qualified pilot in the right seat, and he didn't have that. So he was not legal to be pilot in command.
Understand.
So pilot in command is the final authority.
Yeah.
And the operator is responsible also. How can you operate that knowing that you don't have a qualified pilot in a plane?
If this was another state, not North Carolina, but say if it was in Pennsylvania that doesn't have contributory negligence, but has something like comparative fault, which would say, okay, if you're 70% at fault and I'm 30% at fault, I can still recover the 70%. I just can't recover the 30%. Do you believe that something like this, after there's a final report from the NTSB, will be helpful in determining what percentage one party was versus the other party in terms of either mechanical failure or operator failure?
If the airplane was not properly maintained,
Yes.
the operator is at fault. However, the pilot in command needs to check maintenance records and make sure everything is good to go before they fly. When you get on an airliner, the captain has to check and make sure they check the maintenance record, if everything been signed off. So the pilot in command is the final authority as to they're going to decide to take the flight or not. But the operator is also responsible. So it's highly unlikely that Greg Biffle, the owner, operator of the aircraft, didn't know that Dutton wasn't qualified. He had to know. He hires him to fly the plane.
So like I said, some of these things, if this was a non in North Carolina case, would we be able to look at
I would think
the responsibility and see? And so that 1% at fault issue that we have in North Carolina, the courts are going to be able to tell. What I could say, MayCay, this is one that we'll continue to watch as it continues to unfold.
And let me say this too, that there's talk that there was a sentimental thing going on here. You've got the father that wants the son to fly.
Got it.
Or Greg Biffle may have thought, oh, how cool. Why don't you guys fly the plane? Father, son, what a cool thing. No one's going to know.
Wow.
No one's going to know. So the thing is, experts are saying that it's possible, had there been a qualified pilot in the right seat, that when things started to go wrong, that Dennis could have more concentrate on flying the plane, and the co-pilot could run checklists and with
to try to figure out the problem, solve the issues. Yeah.
Not saying, that Jack wasn't a great pilot. He could have been the best, but he was inexperienced.
Just wasn't qualified.
Wasn't qualified to be in this airplane.
I think, MayCay, you hit that right on the head. Those are the types of things that they will unpack when this case ultimately gets to court, and we'll continue to watch this here at Queen City. We appreciate you all for watching this Queen City News Plus special of Order in the Court. Thanks.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.